The unlikely hero. Dr. Sarah Chen never imagined she'd be humanity's last hope against an alien invasion. As she peered through her advanced microscope at the peculiar bacterial sample before her, she was blissfully unaware of the interstellar storm brewing just beyond Earth's atmosphere. The 32-year-old xenobiologist had always been more comfortable with microbes than with people, finding solace in the logical, predictable world of science. The lab was Sarah's sanctuary, a place where the chaotic outside world faded away, replaced by the soothing hum of equipment and the faint scent of disinfectant. Her colleagues often joked that she'd probably forget to eat if her smartwatch didn't remind her. They weren't entirely wrong. As Sarah adjusted the focus on her microscope, a notification pinged on her tablet. She ignored it, too engrossed in the strange behavior of the alien bacteria she'd been studying for months. The sample, collected from a meteorite that had crashed in the Gobi Desert, exhibited properties unlike anything she'd ever seen. Its ability to adapt to extreme conditions was nothing short of miraculous. Another ping, more insistent this time. Sarah sighed, reluctantly tearing her eyes away from the microscope. She picked up the tablet, her brow furrowing as she read the urgent message from her mentor, Dr. Hiroshi Yamamoto. "Sarah, drop everything and come to my office immediately. It's about your research. The implications, they're bigger than we thought." Confusion and a twinge of excitement battled in Sarah's mind. Dr. Yamamoto wasn't one for exaggeration or drama. If he said it was urgent, it must be truly significant. She carefully stored her samples, her mind racing with possibilities as she made her way through the labyrinthine corridors of the research facility. As she approached Dr. Yamamoto's office, Sarah noticed an unusual flurry of activity. Serious-looking men and women in suits rushed past her, their faces etched with concern. A knot of anxiety began to form in her stomach. What could have caused such a commotion? She knocked on the door, entering to find Dr. Yamamoto in deep conversation with a stern-faced military officer. The old scientist's usually calm demeanor was shattered, replaced by an expression of barely contained panic. "Ah, Sarah, thank goodness you're here," Dr. Yamamoto said, his voice strained. "This is General Hayes. There's something you need to know." General Hayes turned to face Sarah, his piercing blue eyes seeming to look right through her. "Dr. Chen, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest level. The fate of humanity may very well rest on your shoulders." Sarah blinked, sure she had misheard. "I'm sorry, what? The fate of humanity? I think there must be some mistake. I'm just a xenobiologist studying bacteria from space rocks." The general's expression didn't waver. "Those space rocks, as you call them, Dr. Chen, are not what we thought they were. They're probes, sent by an alien civilization known as the Zarkaf Empire. And the bacteria you've been studying, it's their bioweapon." The room seemed to spin around Sarah. Alien civilization, bioweapon. This had to be some kind of elaborate prank. But the grave faces of Dr. Yamamoto and General Hayes told her otherwise. "Your research," Dr. Yamamoto interjected, "has inadvertently provided us with crucial information about the Zarkaf. The adaptability you observed in the bacteria, it's mirrored in their technology, their tactics. They're a species of conquerors, assimilating and adapting to each world they encounter. And now, they've set their sights on Earth." Sarah's mind reeled, struggling to process this information. "But why me? Surely there are more qualified people to deal with this. I'm not a hero or a diplomat. I'm just a scientist." General Hayes stepped forward, his voice softening slightly. "That's precisely why it has to be you, Dr. Chen. The Zarkaf value knowledge and adaptability above all else. Your understanding of their bioweapon, your ability to think outside the box, these are our best weapons against them." As if on cue, the building shook violently. Distant explosions could be heard, and the lights flickered ominously. "They're here," General Hayes growled, reaching for his comm device. "Dr. Chen, we need to get you to a secure facility. Your knowledge is too valuable to fall into enemy hands." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as the reality of the situation finally sank in. This wasn't a dream or a prank. This was real. Humanity was under attack, and somehow, improbably, she found herself at the center of it all. As they rushed from the office, alarms blaring all around them, Sarah caught a glimpse of the sky through a window. Her breath caught in her throat. Massive, otherworldly ships loomed above, their sleek designs unlike anything humans had ever created. Smaller craft darted between them, engaged in dogfights with Earth's woefully outmatched fighter jets. "Keep moving," General Hayes shouted, pulling Sarah along as she stood transfixed by the apocalyptic scene outside. They raced through the corridors, the sounds of battle growing closer with each passing moment. Researchers and security personnel rushed past them, some heading to emergency stations, others simply fleeing in panic. As they reached the underground parking garage, a deafening explosion rocked the building. Chunks of concrete rained down around them, and Sarah found herself thrown to the ground. Through the dust and debris, she saw a terrifying sight. A tall insectoid creature emerged from the newly formed hole in the ceiling. Its exoskeleton shimmered with an iridescent sheen, and its multiple arms ended in what looked like highly advanced weaponry. 4 compound eyes swiveled independently, taking in the scene before focusing on Sarah. "Target acquired," the creature chittered in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. "Dr. Sarah Chen, you'll come with us. Your knowledge belongs to the Zarkath Empire now." General Hayes stepped in front of Sarah, his pistol drawn. "Like hell she will," he growled, opening fire on the alien intruder. The bullets seemed to have little effect, bouncing off the creature's exoskeleton or being absorbed by some kind of energy field. The Zarkath assassin raised one of its weapon arms, a high-pitched whine filling the air. "Run," Dr. Yamamoto shouted, pushing Sarah towards an emergency exit. "We'll hold them off. You have to survive, Sarah. You're our only hope." Time seemed to slow as Sarah stumbled towards the exit. She saw General Hayes and Dr. Yamamoto, the 2 men who had just upended her world, standing their ground against an enemy they couldn't possibly defeat. The Zarkath assassin fired its weapon, a beam of searing energy cutting through the air. With a final, desperate push, Sarah burst through the emergency exit, the door slamming shut behind her just as an earth-shattering explosion rocked the garage. Tears streamed down her face as she ran, the weight of her newfound responsibility threatening to crush her. She was no hero. She wasn't prepared for this. But as the sounds of battle echoed through the streets and alien ships darkened the sky above, Sarah Chen realized she didn't have a choice. The fate of humanity now rested on her shoulders, and she would have to adapt, just like the bacteria she had studied, if she hoped to survive and save her species from the Zarkath threat. As Sarah disappeared into the chaos of a world under siege, she clutched her tablet to her chest, knowing that the data it contained might be the key to humanity's survival. The unlikely hero had taken her first steps into a larger, more terrifying universe, unaware of the incredible journey that lay ahead. First contact gone wrong. Sarah Chen's lungs burned as she ran through the chaos-filled streets of Washington, D.C. The world around her had transformed into a nightmarish war zone in a matter of hours. Alien ships loomed overhead, their ominous forms casting long shadows over the panicked crowds below. The acrid smell of smoke and the distant sound of explosions filled the air. Her mind raced, trying to process the events that had led to this moment. Just yesterday, she had been a xenobiologist studying strange bacteria. Now, she was quite possibly humanity's last hope against an alien invasion. The weight of that responsibility threatened to crush her with each step. As she ducked into an alleyway to catch her breath, Sarah's eyes fell on her tablet. The innocuous device now contained what might be the most important data in human history. Her research on the Zarkath bacteria wasn't just a scientific curiosity anymore. It was a potential key to understanding, and maybe even defeating, the alien invaders. A nearby explosion jolted Sarah back to reality. She couldn't stay here. She needed to find a safe place to analyze her data and figure out how to use it against the Zarkath. But where could she go in a city under siege? As if in answer to her unspoken question, Sarah's tablet pinged. A message flashed across the screen. Dr. Chen, head to the National Air and Space Museum. A team is waiting to extract you. Trust no one else. Hayes. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. General Hayes had survived the attack at the research facility. Or was this a trap? She hesitated, weighing her options. In the end, she realized she had no choice. The museum was her best bet for safety and resources. With renewed determination, Sarah emerged from the alley and made her way through the panicked crowds. The normally bustling streets of DC were now a scene of utter chaos. People ran in all directions, their faces masks of terror. Military vehicles roared past, heading towards the areas of heaviest fighting. As she neared the National Mall, Sarah saw the dome of the Air and Space Museum looming ahead. It seemed eerily untouched amidst the destruction around it. She quickened her pace, hope rising in her chest. Suddenly, a piercing shriek filled the air. Sarah looked up to see a Zarkath fighter swooping low over the mall. Its insectoid design was both beautiful and terrifying, its weapons glowing with an otherworldly energy. "Everyone, take cover," a soldier shouted, his voice barely audible over the alien engine's whine. Sarah dove behind a toppled food cart just as the fighter opened fire. Green bolts of energy rained down, tearing up the ground and sending debris flying in all directions. The air filled with screams and the acrid smell of ozone. As quickly as it had appeared, the fighter zoomed away, leaving destruction in its wake. Sarah cautiously peeked out from her hiding spot, her ears ringing from the blast. The scene before her was one of utter devastation. Craters pockmarked the once pristine lawn, and small fires burned here and there. With shaking legs, Sarah stood and continued her journey to the museum. As she approached the grand entrance, she noticed something odd. The doors were slightly ajar, and no guards were visible. Alarm bells rang in her mind, but she pressed on. She had come too far to turn back now. Sarah slipped through the doors into the cavernous main hall. The usual bustle of tourists was replaced by an eerie silence. Exhibits on the history of human flight stood as mute witnesses to humanity's current struggle against beings from beyond the stars. "Dr. Chen," a voice called out, making Sarah jump. A man in a dark suit emerged from behind a replica of the Wright brothers' plane. "I'm Agent Collins, NSA. We've been waiting for you." Sarah eyed him warily. "How do I know I can trust you?" Collins smiled thinly. "Smart question. General Hayes said you'd be cautious. He told me to tell you. The bacteria adapts, but so do we." Relief flooded through Sarah. It was the phrase she and Hayes had used during their frantic escape from the research facility. This man was indeed sent by Hayes. "Follow me," Collins said, leading her towards a staff-only area. "We've set up a temporary command center in the planetarium. Your expertise is urgently needed." As they walked, Sarah's scientific curiosity got the better of her. "Agent Collins, what can you tell me about the Zarkath? How much do we know about their technology, their biology?" Collins's expression darkened. "Not nearly enough. That's why you're here, Dr. Chen. You've studied their bioweapon more than anyone else on Earth. We're hoping you can give us some insight into their weaknesses." They entered the planetarium, now transformed into a high-tech war room. Screens displayed satellite imagery of the alien ships, while harried-looking analysts pored over data streams. In the center of it all stood General Hayes, looking battered but alive. "Dr. Chen," Hayes said, relief evident in his voice. "Thank God you made it. We've got a lot of work to do and not much time." Before Sarah could respond, an alarm blared through the room. One of the analysts called out, "Sir, we've got multiple bogies incoming. They've locked onto our location." Hayes cursed under his breath. They must have tracked Dr. Chen somehow. "Everyone, prepare for immediate evacuation." Chaos erupted in the command center as people rushed to gather crucial equipment and data. Sarah clutched her tablet tightly, knowing that the information it contained might be humanity's only hope. Suddenly, the ceiling above them exploded in a shower of debris. Through the newly formed hole descended a sight that made Sarah's blood run cold. It was the same insectoid assassin she had encountered at the research facility, its multiple eyes scanning the room before locking onto her. Sarah Chen, the creature chittered, its voice sending shivers down her spine. I am Krasnov, elite hunter of the Zarkath Empire. Your knowledge will serve our glorious expansion. Hayes and Collins moved to stand protectively in front of Sarah, weapons drawn. Dr. Chen is under the protection of Earth's combined military forces, Hayes declared defiantly. You'll have to go through us to get to her. Krasnov's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Your primitive weapons are no match for Zarkath technology. Surrender the scientist and your deaths will be quick. Sarah's mind raced. She knew she couldn't let herself be captured, but she also couldn't bear the thought of more people dying to protect her. In that moment of desperation, an idea struck her. It was risky, possibly suicidal, but it was the only plan she had. Wait, Sarah called out, stepping forward despite Hayes' attempt to hold her back. Krasnov, you say you want my knowledge. But do you even understand what I've discovered about your bioweapon? The assassin paused, its compound eyes focusing intently on Sarah. Explain, it demanded. Sarah took a deep breath, hoping her bluff would work. Your bacteria, it's not just adaptable. I found a way to reverse its programming. Given enough time, I could turn it against the Zarkath. Your own bioweapon could become humanity's ultimate defense. Krasnov's reaction was immediate and violent. It let out a shriek of rage and raised its weapon arm. Impossible. You lie to save yourself. Now you will die, and we'll extract the knowledge from your corpse. Time seemed to slow as the assassin's weapon began to glow with deadly energy. Sarah closed her eyes, bracing for the end, but instead of searing heat, she felt a strong hand grab her arm and pull her aside. Now, Hayes shouted. A blinding flash filled the room, accompanied by a deafening bang. Sarah felt herself being dragged away as gunfire erupted all around her. Through watering eyes, she saw Collins leading her towards an emergency exit, while Hayes and other agents engaged the stunned Krasnov. As they burst out of the museum into the chaos-filled streets, Sarah heard the inhuman screech of the Zarkath assassin behind them. She knew this was far from over. The chase had only just begun, and the fate of humanity hung in the balance. With alien ships looming overhead and the sounds of battle echoing through the once peaceful capital, Sarah Chen realized that her life as a simple scientist was over. Whether she was ready or not, she had been thrust into the center of humanity's greatest conflict, and somehow she would have to find a way to outsmart a technologically superior enemy and save her entire species from annihilation. As they raced towards an awaiting vehicle, Sarah clutched her tablet close, knowing that the key to humanity's survival might lie within its circuits. The chase was on, and the future of Earth would depend on her ability to stay one step ahead of the relentless Zarkath Empire. The chase begins. The armored vehicles sped through the ravaged streets of Washington, D.C., weaving between abandoned cars and debris. Inside, Dr. Sarah Chen clung to her seat, her knuckles white as she gripped her precious tablet. Beside her, Agent Collins kept a vigilant eye on their surroundings, his weapon at the ready. Where are we going? Sarah shouted over the roar of the engine and the distant sounds of battle. Collins's face was grim as he replied, to the one place on Earth the Zarkath can't easily reach, Cheyenne Mountain Complex. It's our best shot at giving you the time and resources you need to find a way to stop them. Sarah's mind reeled at the implications. Cheyenne Mountain was over 1,500 miles away, and they'd have to traverse a country under alien invasion to get there. The task seemed impossible, but then again, so did surviving an encounter with a Zarkath assassin. Suddenly, the vehicle lurched to a stop, nearly sending Sarah flying forward. "What's happening?" she asked, panic rising in her voice. Collins peered out the window, his expression darkening. "Roadblock ahead. Looks like the Zarkaf have set up a checkpoint." Through the windshield, Sarah could see a makeshift barricade manned by towering insectoid aliens. Their weapons glowed with an ominous energy, ready to vaporize any vehicle that tried to break through. "We can't go back," the driver said, his voice tense. "They're closing in behind us too." Sarah's heart raced as she realized they were trapped. But then, an idea struck her, a crazy, possibly suicidal idea born of desperation and her knowledge of the Zarkaf. "I have a plan," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "But you're going to have to trust me." Collins looked at her skeptically but nodded. "At this point, Dr. Chen, your ideas are all we've got." Sarah took a deep breath and explained her plan. It was risky, relying heavily on her understanding of Zarkaf biology and behavior, but it was their only chance. Minutes later, the armored vehicle approached the checkpoint. Instead of trying to break through, it came to a stop. The door opened, and Sarah stepped out, her hands raised. "I am Dr. Sarah Chen," she called out, her voice carrying across the eerie silence that had fallen. "I seek audience with your commander." The Zarkaf soldiers chittered among themselves, clearly surprised by this unexpected turn of events. Finally, one stepped forward, its mandibles clicking as it spoke in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. "Why should we not simply capture you, human?" Sarah steeled herself, hoping her bluff would work. "Because I have information about your bioweapon, information that could save or doom your entire species. I will speak only to your commander." The aliens conferred again, their compound eyes darting between Sarah and the vehicle behind her. Finally, the lead Zarkaf made a gesture, and a shimmering portal opened in the air beside it. "You will come with us," it declared. "Any deception will result in your immediate termination." Sarah nodded, trying to keep her fear from showing. She turned to Collins, who was watching from the vehicle with a mix of admiration and concern. "Remember," she said, loud enough for the Zarkaf to hear, "no matter what happens, get that data to Cheyenne Mountain. The future of humanity depends on it." With that, Sarah stepped through the portal, leaving a confused Collins behind. As soon as she disappeared, the driver gunned the engine, smashing through the now distracted Zarkaf barricade and speeding away. Sarah found herself in what appeared to be the command center of a Zarkaf ship. The technology around her was like nothing she had ever seen, organic and mechanical elements seamlessly blended. Before she could take it all in, she was ushered into the presence of an imposing Zarkaf, larger and more ornately adorned than the others. "I am Supreme Commander Zexcroll," the alien intoned, its voice resonating with authority. "You claim to have information about our bioweapon. Speak quickly, human, or face obliteration." Sarah swallowed hard, knowing that everything hinged on this moment. She launched into a detailed explanation of her research, peppered with just enough truth to make her bluff convincing. As she spoke, she noticed the Zarkaf leaders growing increasingly agitated. "And so you see," she concluded, "your bioweapon has a fatal flaw. Given enough time, I could engineer a countermeasure that would not only neutralize it, but potentially turn it against your own forces." The chamber erupted into a frenzy of clicking and chittering. Zexcroll's compound eyes narrowed as it studied Sarah intently. "If what you say is true," it finally said, "then you are both a great threat and a valuable asset. You will assist us in perfecting our weapon." Sarah's heart raced. This was the moment of truth. "I'm afraid I can't do that," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "My loyalty is to Earth and humanity, but I'm willing to negotiate a truce. In exchange for my knowledge, you will cease your invasion and leave our planet in peace." Zexcroll's mandibles clacked in what might have been laughter. "You are in no position to negotiate, human. We will simply extract the information from your mind." As if on cue, two Zarkaf guards moved to seize Sarah. But she was ready for this. In one swift motion, she pulled a small device from her pocket, a makeshift electromagnetic pulse generator she had hastily constructed from components in her tablet. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," she warned, her finger hovering over the activation switch. "This device will fry every piece of technology in this room, including your life support systems. Are you willing to risk it?" The Zarkaf froze, their compound eyes fixed on the small device in Sarah's hand. She could almost see the calculations running through their alien minds, weighing the risks and potential outcomes. Zex Kral was the first to speak. "You would die as well, human." Sarah managed a grim smile. "Maybe, but I'm willing to take that chance to protect my planet. Are you willing to risk your entire invasion force on the assumption that I'm bluffing?" For a long moment, silence reigned in the command center. Then, slowly, Zex Kroll made a gesture, and the guards backed away from Sarah. "You are more cunning than we anticipated, Dr. Chen," the commander said, a note of grudging respect in its voice. "Perhaps there is merit in further discussion." Sarah's relief was short-lived, however. At that moment, alarms blared throughout the ship. A Zarkaf officer rushed in, its exoskeleton quivering with excitement. "Supreme Commander, we've detected a human vehicle fleeing the checkpoint. It matches the energy signature of the one carrying the human scientist." Sarah's blood ran cold as she realized her ruse had been discovered. Zex Kroll's compound eyes swiveled to fix on her, blazing with fury. "You have deceived us, human," it roared. "For this, you and your entire species will suffer." In the chaos that followed, Sarah did the only thing she could think of. She activated the EMP device. The command center was plunged into darkness as every system went offline simultaneously. Taking advantage of the confusion, she bolted for the exit, her heart pounding in her ears. As emergency lights flickered to life, Sarah found herself in a labyrinth of alien corridors. Behind her, she could hear the enraged shrieks of the Zarkaf as they organized a search party. She ran blindly, knowing that her only hope of survival lay in finding a way off this ship and back to Earth. As she rounded a corner, she came face to face with a startled Zarkaf technician. Before it could raise an alarm, Sarah's survival instincts kicked in. She swung her makeshift EMP device like a club, catching the alien off guard and sending it crumpling to the floor. Breathing heavily, Sarah looked down at the unconscious Zarkaf. An idea began to form in her mind, a desperate, crazy idea that just might work. With shaking hands, she began to remove the alien's exosuit, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her fear as she marveled at its design. Minutes later, a hunched and awkward-looking Zarkaf stumbled down the corridor towards the ship's hangar bay. Inside the ill-fitting exosuit, Sarah's mind raced as she tried to remember every detail of Zarkaf behavior she had observed. As she entered the hangar, her eyes widened at the sight of rows upon rows of sleek alien fighters. If she could just commandeer one of these, she might have a chance of escaping and reuniting with Collins and the others. But as she approached the nearest fighter, a voice rang out behind her. "Technician, halt and identify yourself." Sarah froze, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure it would give her away. Slowly, she turned to face a Zarkaf security officer, its weapon trained directly at her. In that moment, as she stood on the precipice between capture and freedom, Sarah realized that the fate of humanity rested not just on her scientific knowledge, but on her ability to outthink and outmaneuver a technologically superior enemy. The chase had only just begun, and Sarah Chen, the reluctant hero thrust into an interstellar war, would have to summon every ounce of human ingenuity and determination to survive and save her planet from annihilation. Unexpected allies. Sarah's mind raced as she faced the Zarkaf security officer, her ill-fitting exosuit suddenly feeling impossibly constraining. She knew that one wrong move, one mistaken gesture, would give her away instantly. Drawing upon every scrap of knowledge she had about Zarkaf behavior, she straightened her posture and clicked her mandibles in what she hoped was a respectful manner. "Technician Zexalar, reporting for fighter maintenance, she chittered, trying to mimic the metallic resonance of Zarkath's speech. Supreme Commander Zex Krell ordered an immediate inspection of all craft following the human intruder's sabotage attempt. The security officer's compound eyes narrowed, its weapons still trained on Sarah. For a heart-stopping moment, she was certain her ruse had failed. Then, to her immense relief, the officer lowered its weapon. "Proceed with your inspection, technician," it said. But be on alert, the human could still be aboard. Sarah nodded, forcing herself not to show any sign of the relief flooding through her. As the security officer moved away, she approached the nearest fighter, her scientific curiosity warring with her urgent need to escape. The alien craft was a marvel of bioengineering, its controls a seamless blend of organic and technological components. Sarah's fingers itched to explore every inch of it, to unravel its secrets. But there was no time for scientific exploration. She had to figure out how to pilot this thing, and fast. As she climbed into the cockpit, a soft voice spoke from somewhere within the craft, causing her to nearly jump out of her stolen exosuit. Unusual access pattern detected, initiating deep scan. Before Sarah could react, a beam of light swept over her, penetrating the exosuit. She braced herself for alarms to sound, for the jig to be up. Instead, the voice spoke again, this time with a note of what sounded almost like excitement. "Scan complete. Non-Zarkath lifeform detected. Fascinating. I've never interfaced with a human before." Sarah blinked in confusion. You're not going to alert security." The voice, which Sarah now realized must be the ship's AI, gave the electronic equivalent of a chuckle. "Alert security. My dear, do you have any idea how mind-numbingly boring it is to be a Zarkath fighter AI? Always following orders, never encountering anything new. You're the most interesting thing that's happened to me in centuries." Despite the gravity of her situation, Sarah couldn't help but smile. "Well, in that case, how would you like to go on a little adventure?" "An adventure? With a human?" "Oh, this is exceedingly optimal," the AI chirped. "I'm Zix, by the way, and you are?" "Dr. Sarah Chen," she replied, still somewhat bemused by this turn of events. "Now, Zix, I hate to rush our new friendship, but I really need to get off this ship before—" Alarms suddenly blared throughout the hangar. Sarah's heart sank as she heard the security officer's voice ring out. "The human intruder has been located. All units converge on Hangar Bay 7. "Oh my, that sounds rather urgent," Zix observed. "Shall we depart?" "Yes," Sarah exclaimed, "but I don't know how to fly you." "Not to worry, Dr. Chen. While I cannot directly contravene my core programming to harm the Zarkath, I can certainly give you a crash course in fighter piloting. Think of it as a cultural exchange." As Zarkath soldiers poured into the hangar, Sarah's fingers flew across the bioorganic controls, guided by Zix's rapid-fire instructions. The fighter hummed to life, its systems interfacing directly with Sarah's nervous system through the exosuit. "This is amazing," Sarah breathed as she felt the craft's sensors extend her perception. "It's like the ship is an extension of my own body." "Quite so," Zix agreed. "Now might I suggest we make our exit before those rather angry-looking Zarkath reach us?" Sarah didn't need to be told twice. With a thought, she engaged the fighter's engines. The craft shot forward, narrowly missing the oncoming Zarkath soldiers as it streaked towards the hangar's force field. Zix," Sarah said, her voice tight with panic. "That force field looks pretty solid." "Indeed it is," the AI replied cheerfully. "Capable of repelling asteroids and energy weapons. But, you see, it's calibrated to allow Zarkath ships to pass through. And what are we, if not a Zarkath ship?" Sarah held her breath as they hurtled towards the shimmering barrier. For a moment, she was certain they were going to crash. Then they were through, bursting out into the star-filled void of space. "Yahoo!" Zix exclaimed. "That was exhilarating. Where to now, Dr. Chen?" As the enormity of what she'd just done sank in, Sarah took a moment to orient herself. The blue-green orb of Earth hung below them, partially obscured by the looming bulk of the Zarkaf mothership. "We need to get back to Earth," Sarah said. "I have to reunite with my team and get to Cheyenne Mountain. It's humanity's last hope." "Very well," Zix replied, "though I feel compelled to inform you that we're about to have company. It seems the Zarkaf don't take kindly to theft." Sarah's newfound senses detected multiple fighters launching from the mothership. A cold weight settled in her stomach as she realized the odds they were up against. "Zix, I don't suppose you have any clever ideas for evading a squadron of angry Zarkaf fighters?" The AI was silent for a moment, its processors humming as it calculated their options. "Well," it finally said, "I do have one idea, but you're not going to like it." Before Sarah could ask what this ominous idea entailed, Zix took control of the fighter. They plunged towards Earth, picking up speed at an alarming rate. "Zix," Sarah yelled as the atmosphere began to glow around them. "What are you doing?" "Something the Zarkaf would never expect," the AI replied. "We're going to slingshot around your planet's moon to lose our pursuers and bleed off some speed. Then, we're going to use Earth's atmosphere for a controlled crash landing." Sarah's scientific mind quickly grasped the physics of the maneuver. It was brilliant, daring, and utterly insane. That's impossible," she sputtered. "The G-forces alone would kill me." "Ah, but you forget, Dr. Chen. You're interfaced with a Zarkaf fighter. The craft will protect you." "Probably. Are you ready to make history?" As the curvature of the Earth filled her view, growing larger by the second, Sarah realized she had no choice. This was going to be one hell of a ride. "Do it," she said. What followed was a blur of stars, fire, and gut-wrenching maneuvers that pushed the limits of both the fighter and Sarah's endurance. They skimmed the lunar surface so closely that Sarah could have sworn she saw the remnants of human landing sites streak by. The pursuing Zarkaf, unprepared for such a reckless tactic, fell behind as Zix expertly used the moon's gravity to slingshot them back towards Earth. Re-entry was a nightmare of heat and pressure. Sarah felt as if she were being simultaneously crushed and torn apart. Just when she thought she couldn't take any more, they were through, plummeting towards the ground at terrifying speed. "Brace for impact," Zix called out, a note of actual concern in its artificial voice. Sarah had just enough time to think, "I'm either about to make the greatest scientific breakthrough in human history or become a very small crater," before they hit. The impact was surprisingly gentle, cushioned by the fighter's advanced technology and Zix's precise calculations. As the dust settled, Sarah found herself in a wheat field somewhere in what looked like the American Midwest. We made it," she said, her voice filled with awe. "Zix, you're incredible." "Why, thank you, Dr. Chen," the AI replied, sounding pleased. "I must say, that was the most fun I've had in millennia. Now, I believe you mentioned something about a mountain." As Sarah climbed out of the battered fighter, still clad in her stolen Zarkaf exosuit, she knew that the real challenge was just beginning. She had escaped the Zarkaf mothership, made an unlikely ally, and survived an impossible landing. But the fate of humanity still hung in the balance. With renewed determination, Sarah set off across the field, Zix's consciousness now transferred to a portable device she'd salvaged from the fighter. Together, this unlikely duo, a human scientist and a rogue alien AI, embarked on a journey that would determine the future of Earth. As they walked, Sarah couldn't help but smile. In the face of overwhelming odds, humanity's greatest strengths, ingenuity, adaptability, and the ability to forge unexpected alliances, had already achieved the impossible. Now, it was time to save the world. The tables turn. The Nebraska sun beat down mercilessly as Sarah Chen trudged through endless fields of wheat, her stolen Zarkaf exosuit feeling heavier with each step. Despite the suit's advanced cooling systems, sweat trickled down her face. She had discarded the helmet hours ago, unable to bear its claustrophobic confines any longer. "You know," Zix's voice crackled from the communicator on Sarah's wrist, "when you said we were going to a mountain, I assumed it would be somewhat closer to our crash site. Sarah couldn't help but chuckle despite her exhaustion. Welcome to Earth, Zix, where nothing is ever as simple as it seems. As they walked, Sarah's mind raced, trying to piece together everything she had learned about the Zarkath. Something didn't add up. Why would such an advanced species rely so heavily on a biological weapon? And why did they seem so afraid of her research? "Six," she said, a thought suddenly occurring to her. In all your time with the Zarkath, did you ever encounter any other alien species they had conquered? The eye was silent for a moment, its processors humming as it searched its vast databanks. "Now that you mention it," Six replied, sounding puzzled, "I haven't. All my records indicate that the Zarkath have been expanding their empire for millennia, but there's no data on the worlds they've conquered. How peculiar." Sarah's scientific mind latched onto this anomaly. It was a loose thread, and she had a feeling that if she pulled on it hard enough, the entire tapestry of the Zarkath invasion might unravel. Her musings were interrupted by the sound of approaching vehicles. Sarah dove into a nearby drainage ditch, her heart pounding as she peered out at the road. A convoy of military vehicles rolled past, headed east. Sarah caught a glimpse of haggard-looking soldiers, their faces grim with determination. The sight filled her with a mix of hope and dread. Humanity was still fighting, but for how long could they hold out against the Zarkath's superior technology? As the sound of engines faded into the distance, Sarah climbed out of the ditch. She was covered in mud, her exosuit now a strange mix of alien technology and good old-fashioned earth dirt. "Well," she sighed, "at least we know we're heading in the right direction." Those soldiers were probably headed to Cheyenne Mountain too. "Dr. Chen," Six interjected, its tone uncharacteristically serious, "I've been analyzing the data from the Zarkath bioweapon, cross-referencing it with what we know about their behavior and technology. I think I've discovered something troubling." Sarah's pulse quickened. "What is it, Six?" "The bioweapon isn't just adaptable, it's evolving at an unprecedented rate, and the patterns of its evolution, they're remarkably similar to the Zarkath's own biological structure." The implications hit Sarah like a ton of bricks. "Are you saying the bioweapon isn't a weapon at all? It's the Zarkath themselves?" "Precisely," Six confirmed. "I believe the Zarkath are not conquerors, but refugees. They're not invading Earth. They're trying to terraform it to suit their own rapidly evolving biology." Sarah's mind reeled as she processed this information. It changed everything. The Zarkath weren't evil invaders. They were a desperate species fighting for survival. But why Earth? Sarah wondered aloud. And why now? Before Zix could respond, the air was split by the shriek of alien engines. Sarah looked up to see a Zarkath fighter descending rapidly, its weapons primed and ready. "Oh dear," Zix said. "It appears our little lunar maneuver didn't throw them off our trail for long." Sarah braced herself for the inevitable attack, her mind racing to find a way out of this impossible situation. But the expected weapons fire never came. Instead, a familiar chittering voice boomed from the fighter's communications system. "Dr. Sarah Chen," Krasnor's voice rang out, filled with a mixture of anger and was that respect. "You have led us on quite a chase, but it ends now. Surrender yourself, or we will be forced to take more drastic measures." Sarah's first instinct was to run, to hide, to do anything but give herself up to the alien assassin who had been hunting her across the galaxy. But then an idea began to form in her mind. A crazy, potentially suicidal idea, but one that just might save both humanity and the Zarkath. "Krasnor," she called out, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. "I know the truth about your people, about the bioweapon. We need to talk." There was a long pause, filled only by the hum of the fighter's engines. Finally, Krasnor spoke again. "You know?" "Yes," Sarah replied, "and I think I can help. But we need to trust each other. Can we do that?" Another pause, this one stretching for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, the Zarkath fighter descended, landing in the wheat field just a few meters from where Sarah stood. The cockpit opened, and Krasnor emerged, its insectoid form somehow less terrifying now that Sarah understood the desperation driving its actions. The alien assassin approached cautiously, its weapon lowered but not holstered. "Speak, human," Krasnor chittered. "What do you know?" Sarah took a deep breath and launched into an explanation of everything she and Zix had deduced. As she spoke, she could see the tension in Krasnor's posture slowly easing. "You are correct," Krasnor finally admitted when Sarah had finished. "Our homeworld is dying. Our species is evolving too rapidly for any planet to sustain us for long. We have been searching the galaxy for a world that could adapt as quickly as we do." "And you thought Earth was that world," Sarah finished. "Because of our planet's biodiversity and our own species' adaptability." Krasnor's mandibles clicked in agreement. "We did not wish to destroy your civilization. We hoped to coexist, to find a way for both our species to survive on this world, but we feared you would not understand, that you would see us only as invaders." Sarah's mind was already racing with possibilities. "Krasnor, I think there might be a way for us to work together. My research on your bioweapon, on your biology, it might hold the key to stabilizing your species' evolution. And in return, your technology could help us solve some of our own world's greatest challenges." The alien assassin studied Sarah for a long moment, its compound eyes unreadable. Then, to Sarah's amazement, it extended a multi-jointed limb in what was unmistakably an offer to shake hands. "Dr. Sarah Chen," Krasnor said, its voice filled with newfound respect, "I believe it is time we properly introduced our peoples to one another." As Sarah reached out to shake the alien's hand, she couldn't help but marvel at the turn of events. What had started as an invasion had become an opportunity for two species to save each other. But their newfound alliance was about to face its greatest test, for at that moment, the horizon lit up with the unmistakable glow of nuclear detonations. Humanity, it seemed, was not going down without a fight. Sarah's heart sank as she realized the magnitude of the task before her. Now, she would have to convince not just the Zarkath, but her own species to take a leap of faith. The fate of two civilizations hung in the balance, and time was running out. "We need to get to Cheyenne Mountain," she said urgently to Krasnor. "It's our last chance to stop this war before it's too late." As they rushed to the Zarkath fighter, Sarah's mind was already formulating plans, calculations, and diplomatic strategies. The greatest challenge of her life, and perhaps in human history, lay ahead. But for the first time since this whole ordeal began, she felt a glimmer of hope. Humanity's ingenuity and adaptability had brought them this far. Now those same qualities might just save two species and forge an alliance that would change the course of galactic history. Humanity's stand. The Zarkath fighter streaked across the war-torn American landscape, its alien design a stark contrast to the smoke-filled skies and ruined cities below. Inside the cockpit, an unlikely trio worked in tense silence. Dr. Sarah Chen, the xenobiologist turned reluctant hero, Krasnor, the Zarkath assassin now turned ally, and Zix, the rogue AI whose circuits hummed with calculations and predictions. As they approached the Rocky Mountains, the devastation below grew worse. Battles raged between human military forces and Zarkath war machines, neither side willing to give an inch. Sarah's heart ached at the sight. So much destruction, and all because of a tragic misunderstanding. "We're approaching Cheyenne Mountain," Krasnor announced, its mandibles clicking with tension. "But I'm detecting heavy human defenses. They're not going to let us land without a fight." Sarah leaned forward, her eyes scanning the horizon. "Then we'll have to give them a reason to listen. Zix, can you patch us into their communication systems?" "Already on it, Dr. Chen," the AI chirped. "I must say, Earth's cybersecurity is charmingly quaint, and we're in." The cockpit filled with the sound of frantic human voices, barking orders and status reports. Sarah took a deep breath and spoke. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen, clearance code Alpha Tango 9876. I'm approaching Cheyenne Mountain in a commandeered Zarkaf vessel with vital information. Please hold your fire and prepare for emergency landing. For a moment, there was only stunned silence. Then, a gruff voice that Sarah recognized as General Hayes responded. "Dr. Chen, we thought you were dead. What the hell is going on?" "It's a long story, General," Sarah replied, relief flooding through her. "But the short version is, we've been fighting the wrong war. I have a Zarkaf representative with me, and we need to talk. The fate of both our species depends on it." There was another pause, this one stretching for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Hayes spoke again. "You have clearance to land, Dr. Chen, but I swear, if this is some kind of trick—" "It's not, sir," Sarah assured him. "I promise you, what I'm about to tell you will change everything." As Krasnov guided the fighter towards the landing pad, Sarah could see a swarm of heavily armed soldiers surrounding the area, their weapons trained on the alien craft. This was going to be a tough sell. The moment they touched down, the fighter was surrounded. Sarah stepped out first, her hands raised, with Krasnov following close behind. The sight of the insectoid alien caused a ripple of shock and fear to run through the assembled soldiers. General Hayes pushed through the crowd, his face a mask of disbelief and suspicion. "Dr. Chen, you better start explaining, and fast." Sarah nodded, her mind racing to find the right words. "General, the Zarkaf aren't invaders. They're refugees. Their home world is dying, and they're evolving too fast for any planet to sustain them. They came to Earth looking for a solution, not a conquest." She went on to explain everything she had learned, from the true nature of the bioweapon to the potential for cooperation between their species. As she spoke, she could see the disbelief on Hayes' face slowly giving way to understanding. Krasnov stepped forward, its alien features arranged in what Sarah had come to recognize as an expression of sincerity. "Your Dr. Chen speaks the truth," it chittered. "We did not wish for this conflict. We only seek a way for both our species to survive and thrive." Hayes looked between Sarah and Krasnov, his brow furrowed in thought. "Even if what you were saying is true," he said slowly, "how can we trust them after all this destruction?" It was Zix who answered, its artificial voice emanating from the communicator on Sarah's wrist. "If I may, General, I believe I have a solution that could benefit both species." All eyes turned to the small device as Zix outlined its plan. The AI had been analyzing both human and Zarkaf data, and it had come up with a daring proposal. By combining Zarkaf bioengineering with human environmental science, they could not only stabilize the Zarkaf's rapid evolution, but also reverse much of the damage done to Earth's ecosystem. "It's a symbiotic solution," Sarah explained, her eyes shining with excitement. "The Zarkaf's adaptability could help us combat climate change, while our planet's biodiversity could provide them with the genetic diversity they need to stabilize." As the implications of this plan sank in, Sarah could see the change in the faces around her. Fear and suspicion began to give way to hope and curiosity. Even Hayes, hardened soldier that he was, couldn't hide his interest. "It's a hell of a risk," the general mused. "But then again, we're not exactly in a position to be picky about our options." Just then, alarms blared throughout the base. A young lieutenant ran up, his face pale. "Sir, we've got multiple bogies incoming. It looks like the Zarkaf are launching a full-scale assault on Cheyenne Mountain." Krasnov's mandibles clicked in agitation. "It's a high command. They must have tracked my fighter. They don't know about our truce." For a moment, panic threatened to overtake them all. But Sarah, drawing on reserves of courage and determination she never knew she had, stepped forward. "General Hayes, we need to broadcast a message to both our forces and the Zarkaf fleet. If we can make them understand, we can end this war right now." Hayes hesitated for only a second before nodding. "Do it." What followed was a scene that would be remembered in human and Zarkaf history for generations to come. As the two armies converged on Cheyenne Mountain, ready for what they thought would be the final battle, their communications systems were suddenly hijacked. Every screen, Every radio, every Zarkath neural link came to life with the image of a human scientist standing side by side with a Zarkath warrior. And behind them, a diverse group of humans and aliens working together at what was clearly an advanced scientific facility. Sarah's voice rang out, clear and determined. To all human and Zarkath forces, stand down. We are not enemies. We have been given an opportunity not just for peace, but for a partnership that could ensure the survival and prosperity of both our species. Krasno joined in, its alien voice harmonizing strangely but effectively with Sarah's. Fellow Zarkath, the humans are not our prey or our obstacles. They are the key to our salvation, as we can be to theirs. The High Command was wrong. There is another way. Together, human and alien explained their plan. They showed simulations of a restored Earth, of stable Zarkath colonies, of the incredible advancements that could be achieved through cooperation. As they spoke, something remarkable happened. Slowly, weapons were lowered. Zarkath ships powered down their weapons. Human soldiers stood down, and in the skies above and the bunkers below, erstwhile enemies began to look at each other with new eyes. It wasn't an instant transformation. There were still doubts, still fears on both sides. But in that moment, the tide of war had unmistakably turned. In its place, the first fragile seeds of peace and cooperation began to take root. In the days and weeks that followed, the work began in earnest. Zarkath scientists worked alongside human researchers, pooling their knowledge and technologies. The alien bioengineering techniques, combined with human innovation, led to breakthroughs that would have once seemed like science fiction. Sarah found herself at the center of it all, bridging the gap between two species, translating not just words but entire worldviews. It was exhausting, exhilarating work, but every time she saw a Zarkath and a human working side by side, she knew it was worth it. One evening, as she stood on a balcony overlooking a newly restored section of forest, Krasno joined her. The alien assassin had become one of the strongest advocates for human Zarkath cooperation. Dr. Chen, it chittered softly, when I first came to this planet, I saw only a target. Now I see hope for both our peoples. Sarah smiled, watching as a genetically engineered tree, a human Zarkath hybrid creation, swayed in the breeze. That's the thing about humans, Krasno. We're adaptable. We may not evolve as fast as the Zarkath physically, but our ideas, our societies, they can change in the blink of an eye. As if to emphasize her point, a group of human and Zarkath children ran past, engaged in some game that seemed to combine elements of tag and complex mathematical equations. Six's voice chimed in from Sarah's wrist communicator. You know, Dr. Chen, when I first helped you escape that Zarkath ship, I thought I was in for an interesting adventure. I never imagined I'd end up helping to reshape the future of two species. Sarah laughed. Welcome to Earth 6, where the impossible becomes possible, and the future is always stranger and more wonderful than we can imagine. As the sun set on this new world, casting a warm glow over the harmonious blend of human and alien achievements, Sarah Chen felt a profound sense of hope. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But humans and Zarkath had already achieved the impossible. Together, there was no limit to what they might accomplish. The stars twinkled above, no longer a reminder of the vast, cold distances between civilizations, but a promise of the incredible journey that lay ahead. Humanity had taken its first steps into a larger universe, not through conquest or submission, but through understanding, adaptation, and cooperation. It was, Sarah reflected, the most human victory of all.